Hello students. In today's video we will discuss the anatomy and physiology of endocrine system, a complete comprehensive overview. Endocrine system is made up of a network of endocrine glands, and there are two very important characteristic features of endocrine glands. First of all, endocrine glands produce chemical substances called as hormones. Now, in addition to this, endocrine glands are ductless glands. They do not possess any duct or a tube, and the hormone is released directly in the blood. Now, look at this figure. Now, this figure shows endocrine glands of the body. There are 9 main endocrine glands that produce, store and secrete hormones. Now, these glands are hypothalamus gland, then pituitary, pineal, thyroid, then parathyroid, thymus, adrenal, pancreas, ovaries in the females and testes in the males. Now let's first understand the location of these endocrine glands. First and the most important is the hypothalamus. Now hypothalamus, as you can see here, is a small area in the brain located just below the thalamus. Now pituitary gland is located just below the hypothalamus. Size of pituitary gland is that of a pea. Hypothalamus and pituitary, they act as a unit. Now towards the middle of the brain is the pineal gland. It produces a hormone called as melatonin. So these three glands are located in the region of brain. The glands, namely hypothalamus, pituitary and the pineal gland. Now thyroid is a butterfly-shaped endocrine gland located in the front part of the neck, just below the larynx or the voice box. Thyroid gland produces 3 hormones, namely triiodothyronine, that is T3, thyroxine, that is T4, and calcitonin. Now, as you can see in this figure, there are 4 very small glands, no larger than the grain of rice, located on the surface of thyroid gland. These are the 4 parathyroid glands. Parathyroid gland produces parathyroid hormone that regulates concentration of calcium in the blood. Next endocrine gland is the thymus gland. It is present in the upper part of chest between the 2 lungs, and it produces a hormone called as thymosin. Thymosin is required for the development of T lymphocytes, and as we all know, T lymphocytes are WBCs that fight toxins and provide immunity to the body. Now, adrenal glands are triangular shaped glands located on the top of the kidney. Outer part of the gland is called as adrenal cortex, while the central part is termed as adrenal medulla. Adrenal cortex produces adrenocorticoids, namely glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and sex hormones in insignificant amount, while medulla produces adrenaline and noradrenaline. Then pancreas. Pancreas is an elongated leaf-like structure located in the upper part of abdomen. Pancreas produces insulin and glucagon. Now, insulin and glucagon are the 2 hormones that regulate levels of glucose in the blood. Next endocrine gland is the ovaries in the females and testes in the males. Now, ovaries and testes are located in the pelvic region. Ovaries produce female reproductive hormones, namely estrogen and progesterone, while testes produces male reproductive hormone, namely testosterone. So this is in brief on the location and hormones produced by the endocrine glands of the body. Now let's discuss how these endocrine glands are regulated or controlled in the endocrine system. Now look at this figure. This is hypothalamus. This is a zoomed view of the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus produces hormone oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone, that is ADH. And the hypothalamus also produces some regulatory hormones termed as the releasing hormones. Now located just below the hypothalamus is the pituitary gland, which has 2 lobes, anterior pituitary and the posterior pituitary. Now, oxytocin and antidiuretic hormone that are produced by the hypothalamus are transported along the neuronal pathway, and these are stored in the posterior pituitary. Now, as per the requirement of body, hypothalamus stimulates the posterior pituitary and these hormones are released in the blood. So, hypothalamus regulates functioning of the posterior pituitary. Now, these regulatory hormones are the releasing hormones which are produced by the hypothalamus. And these hormones control and regulate functioning of anterior pituitary. Now, let's see how this process works. Now, TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone produced by the hypothalamus, is released in these blood capillaries which are shown here in the red color. Now, thyrotropin releasing hormone stimulates anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone, that is TSH. TSH further stimulates thyroid gland to release hormones, namely thyroxine T4, triiodothyronine T3 and calcitonin in the blood. So, hypothalamus regulates anterior pituitary and anterior pituitary in turn regulates the thyroid gland. Now, another releasing hormone that is produced by the hypothalamus is the CRH, that is corticotropin releasing hormone. Now, this hormone stimulates anterior pituitary to produce adrenocorticotropic hormone, that is ACTH, which further stimulates adrenal cortex to produce adrenocorticoids, namely glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and very small quantity of sex hormones. Then GnRH, that is the gonadotropin releasing hormone. Now, this hormone released by the hypothalamus stimulates anterior pituitary to produce gonadotropins, namely follicle stimulating hormone FSH and luteinizing hormone, that is LH. Now, FSH and LH further stimulate ovaries and the testes. So, this is a beautiful figure that explains the process by which hypothalamus regulates functioning of pituitary gland and pituitary gland regulates the functioning of thyroid gland, then adrenal cortex, testes and the ovaries. So, pituitary gland, as it regulates the functioning of these many endocrine glands, is termed as the master gland. Now, depending on the requirement of body, the production and secretion of hormones is tightly controlled. So, concentration of hormone in the blood sends feedback signals to the hypothalamus. Now, positive stimulation stimulates increase in the secretion of hormone, while the negative stimulation inhibits release of hormone. Now, stimulation here is shown by the green arrow and positive sign, while inhibition is shown by the red arrows. Now, let's first understand negative feedback control. Consider the example of hormones triiodothyronine, that is T3, and thyroxine, that is T4. Now, if the blood levels of T3 and T4 rise in the blood, that is, levels of these hormones become more than normal, negative feedback signal is sent to the hypothalamus. Release of TRH, that is thyrotropin releasing hormone, from hypothalamus reduces, which further reduces secretion of TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone, from anterior pituitary. This causes reduced stimulation of thyroid gland and less secretion of T3 and T4, and thus initially raised blood levels of T3 and T4 reduce, and thereby the levels of T3 and T4 in the blood become normal. Similarly, reduced blood levels of T3 and T4 send positive feedback signals to the hypothalamus. Release of TRH and in turn release of TSH increase. Now, this stimulates thyroid gland to secrete increased amount of T3 and T4, and thus initially reduced blood levels of T3 and T4 increase, and thereby levels of T3 and T4 in the blood become normal. So, these figures nicely explain concept of feedback loops in the endocrine system. After understanding basics of endocrine system, let's study hormones released by the individual endocrine gland and their functions. First and the most important endocrine gland is the hypothalamus. Now very important, you must remember that hypothalamus produces releasing hormones which stimulate the anterior pituitary. But in few instances, hypothalamus produces release inhibiting hormone that inhibit release of hormone from the anterior pituitary. Now, the first hormone that is released by the hypothalamus is the CRH, that is corticotropin releasing hormone. Now, CRH stimulates anterior pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which further stimulates adrenal cortex. Next hormone produced by hypothalamus is the gonadotropin releasing hormone. In short, GnRH. Now, gonadotropin releasing hormone, as the name itself suggests, stimulates anterior pituitary to release gonadotropins. Now, these gonadotropins are two hormones, namely luteinizing hormone LH and follicle stimulating hormone, that is FSH. Now, these hormones further stimulate ovaries and the testes. Then next hormone produced by hypothalamus is the thyrotropin releasing hormone, in short TRH. Now TRH stimulates anterior pituitary to release thyroid stimulating hormone, that is TSH, which further stimulates the thyroid gland. Now growth hormone releasing hormone GHRH produced by the hypothalamus stimulates anterior pituitary to release growth hormone, which is responsible for the growth of entire body. Then growth hormone release inhibiting hormone, which is also termed as somatostatin, produced by the hypothalamus, inhibits release of growth hormone from the anterior pituitary. Then prolactin releasing hormone, in short PRH, released by the hypothalamus, stimulates anterior pituitary to release prolactin. Prolactin is required for the synthesis of milk by the mammary gland. Then another hormone is the prolactin inhibiting hormone PIH, produced by the hypothalamus. Now prolactin inhibiting hormone inhibits the release of prolactin from the anterior pituitary. So these are the hormones and their functions which are produced by the hypothalamus. Now after hypothalamus, let's discuss hormones released by the pituitary gland. Now as we all know, pituitary gland has two lobes, anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. Let's first talk about the hormones that are released by the anterior pituitary. Now these are the hormones that are produced by the anterior pituitary. Now first four hormones. These four hormones are termed as tropic hormones because they stimulate and regulate activity of other endocrine glands. Now anterior pituitary produces ACTH, that is adrenocorticotropic hormone, that stimulates adrenal cortex to secrete adrenocorticoids. Now adrenocorticoids include three types of hormones, namely glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids and androgens. Androgens are produced in very small quantity and these are the sex hormones. Now next tropic hormone that is produced by the anterior pituitary is the TSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone. Now TSH stimulates thyroid gland to release triiodothyronine, that is T3, thyroxine, that is T4 and calcitonin. Another tropic hormone that is produced by the anterior pituitary is the FSH, that is follicle stimulating hormone. Now this hormone stimulates testes as well as ovaries. Now follicle stimulating hormone stimulates production of sperms by testes and ovum by the ovaries. Now it also stimulates the release of female reproductive hormone, that is estrogen, by the ovaries. Now next tropic hormone released by the anterior pituitary is the LH, that is luteinizing hormone. Now this hormone also stimulates testes and the ovaries. It stimulates the production of testosterone from the testes in male, and it also stimulates production of progesterone from corpus luteum in the ovaries in the female. Now, since anterior pituitary regulates the functioning of adrenal cortex, thyroid gland, then ovaries and testes, it is termed as the master gland. Now, another hormone produced by the anterior pituitary is the growth hormone. Now, growth hormone is responsible for inducing the growth of entire body, but specifically it promotes the growth of bones and the skeletal muscles. Now, another hormone produced by the anterior pituitary is the prolactin. Now, prolactin is essential for the development of mammary glands during pregnancy and synthesis of milk from mammary glands after the childbirth. So, these are the hormones and their functions produced by the anterior pituitary. Now, let's discuss hormones produced by the posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary produces antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Now, antidiuretic hormone, in short ADH. Now, diuresis means increased in the volume and increased excretion of urine. Therefore, antidiuretic hormone is an agent that reduces volume of urine, thereby reduces excretion of urine. Now, as we all know, kidney is made up of functional units called as nephron. Now, blood in the glomerulus is filtered and filtrate passes in the lumen of the nephron. Now, 90% of this filtrate is the water. Now, antidiuretic hormone increases reabsorption of water from the filtrate in the nephron. So, reabsorption of water in the blood increases. So, on one hand, this reabsorption of water in the blood reduces volume of urine that is produced, and on the other hand, this increases blood volume. So, increase in the blood volume increases blood pressure, and therefore antidiuretic hormone is also called as vasopressin. So, in summary, antidiuretic hormone reduces the volume of urine, increases blood volume, and increases the blood pressure. Another hormone produced by the posterior pituitary is the oxytocin. Now, oxytocin contracts smooth muscles of the uterus, and contraction of the uterus is required for the childbirth. Now, in addition to this, as discussed earlier, prolactin is required for the synthesis of milk by the breast. Now, oxytocin is essential for the ejection or for the release of milk from the mammary glands or the breast. Now, very important, as discussed earlier, antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin are actually synthesized in the hypothalamus, but they are stored in the posterior pituitary and they are released from the posterior pituitary in response to the stimulation of posterior pituitary mediated by the hypothalamus. So, these are the hormones which are produced by the posterior pituitary. Now, the next endocrine gland is the thyroid gland. Now, as discussed earlier, thyroid gland produces three hormones: triiodothyronine, in short T3, thyroxine, T4, and calcitonin. Now, the main function of T3 and T4 is to regulate metabolic rate. Now, as heat is produced during the metabolic processes, T3 and T4 also regulate production of heat in the body. Now, overactivity of thyroid gland increases metabolic rate and increases the production of heat, while reduced activity of thyroid gland reduces the metabolic rate and reduces the production of heat. Now, T3 and T4 are also very essential for the development of bones, skeletal muscles, and nervous tissue. Another hormone that is released by the thyroid gland is calcitonin. Now, as we know, calcium is stored in the bones. Calcitonin promotes storage of calcium in the bones. And this calcium is actually moving from the blood towards the bone. So, it moves from the blood towards the bones and gets deposited in the bones. So this reduces blood calcium levels. So the main function of calcitonin is to reduce the levels of calcium in the blood. Next endocrine gland is the parathyroid gland. Now it produces parathyroid hormone, in short PTH. Now in contrast to the calcitonin that reduces levels of calcium in the blood, parathyroid hormone increases levels of calcium in the blood. Now, parathyroid hormone stimulates osteoclast, that is the bone breaking cells. This causes release of calcium from the bones, and that calcium moves into the blood. So the levels of calcium in the blood increases. So the main function of parathyroid hormone is to increase the levels of calcium in the blood. Now the next endocrine gland is the adrenal gland. Now this gland is composed of two parts. Outer part is the adrenal cortex and the inner part is the adrenal medulla. Now let's first talk about the hormones which are released by the adrenal cortex. Now adrenal cortex produces three types of steroidal hormones, namely glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids and sex hormones. Now sex hormones are produced in insignificant amount, so we are not going to discuss them here. Now main glucocorticoid is the cortisol. Now very important to remember that the main function of glucocorticoids is to prepare the body to fight stress. So glucocorticoids protect our body during stress and trauma. Now as we all know, during stress, energy requirement of the body cells increase. So glucocorticoids, as the name suggests itself, glucocorticoids increase availability of glucose in the body during stress. So glucocorticoids increase levels of glucose in the blood. Now glucocorticoids stimulate breakdown of proteins, and proteins are used as a source of glucose. In addition to this, they also induce lipolysis, that is breakdown of lipids. Lipids are broken down to fatty acids, and fatty acids are also used as an energy source by the body. Now very important to remember from the pharmacology point of view that synthetic glucocorticoids are called as corticosteroids. Now corticosteroids are very potent anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressant agents. These corticosteroids are very important in the management of inflammatory diseases like asthma and rheumatoid arthritis. Next is the mineralocorticoid. Now the main mineralocorticoid is the aldosterone. Now very important, the primary or the main function of aldosterone is to maintain water and electrolyte balance in the body. So aldosterone functions as per the feedback received from the body. Now as per the feedback received from the body, aldosterone stimulates reabsorption of sodium by the renal tubules in the kidney, and it promotes excretion of potassium, and therefore the levels of sodium in the blood rise and concentration of potassium in the blood reduce. So this is a mechanism by which aldosterone regulates water and electrolyte balance. After adrenal cortex, let's discuss hormones of adrenal medulla. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are the two hormones produced by adrenal medulla. Now these hormones stimulate sympathetic nervous system and prepare the body to deal with emergency situations like fear, stress and trauma. Now these hormones are responsible for preparing the body for the fight or flight response. Now let's understand this with the help of an example. For example, if you're being chased by a mad street dog, you know, given a chance, this dog will bite you. So now you have two options, either to fight with the mad dog or to run away. You know you can't fight with the dog, so you will start running. That is a flight response. Immediately, adrenaline and noradrenaline will be released from the adrenal medulla in the blood. Now, adrenaline and noradrenaline will increase the heartbeat, they will increase the blood pressure, increase rate of respiration, and increase the flow of blood to the skeletal muscles of the leg. So, they prepare the body for the flight response. Now, similar body responses are also observed during the fight response. So, adrenaline and noradrenaline prepare our body to deal with the emergency situations and are responsible for the fight or flight response. Next endocrine gland is the pancreas. Now, pancreas is both an exocrine and endocrine gland. Now, pancreatic islets of pancreas are composed of beta cells that produce insulin and alpha cells that produce glucagon. Now, both these hormones regulate levels of glucose in the blood. Insulin reduces the levels of glucose in blood, while glucagon increases the levels of glucose in the blood. Now, insulin stimulates uptake and use of glucose present in the blood by the body cells. In the absence of insulin, body cells cannot utilize glucose which is present in the blood. Now, as insulin is responsible for stimulating uptake of glucose by the body cells, it reduces blood glucose levels. On the other hand, glucagon increases the levels of glucose in the blood. Now, next gland is the pineal gland. Pineal gland produces the hormone melatonin. Now, melatonin is required for regulating the sleep-wake cycle of the body. That is, we sleep during the night and we remain awake during the daytime. So, this cycle is regulated by the melatonin. Now, very important, darkness stimulates secretion of melatonin. So, this is the hormone that is produced by the pineal gland. Next gland is the thymus gland. Thymus gland produces thymosin. Now, as the name suggests, thymosin is required for the development of T lymphocytes. Now, T lymphocytes, as we know, are the white blood cells. And these T lymphocytes, they produce cell-mediated immunity. Now, this cell-mediated immunity destroy the noxious substances, destroy the toxins and provide immunity to the body. Now, very important to remember that the thymus gland, the size of a thymus gland increases from childbirth up to the puberty, but it starts to shrink after the puberty. Now, the next endocrine glands are the ovaries in the females and testes in the males. Now, ovaries produce female reproductive hormones, namely estrogen and the progesterone. Now, estrogen is very essential for regulating the menstrual cycle. It is also required for the development of female characteristics like development of breast, deposition of fat on the hips and breast. Then it is also required for the development and maintenance of female reproductive system like the development of uterus, development of uterine tubes, development of ovaries. Now, progesterone, as the name suggests, this is required for the gestation. This is required for maintaining the pregnancy. Now, testes in the male produces male reproductive hormone, namely the testosterone. Testosterone is required for the production of sperms, and it is also required for the development of male characteristic features like growth and development of facial and body hairs, growth of the penis, etc. So, this is in brief on the anatomy and physiology of the endocrine system. If you find the video useful, kindly like, subscribe and share this video. Thanks for watching this video.